It's almost a year to the day that Frank Lampard arrived at Goodison Park, taking over from Rafa Benitez's dismal reign and tasked with keeping Everton in the Premier League. The new manager did just that, surviving the drop on the final game of the season to maintain Everton's 68-year stint in the top flight. But the new campaign brought more misery for fans, with the Toffees amassing just 3 wins all season. That's less than any other team in England's top 4 divisions. Despite those results, Lampard was popular with the fans, but in mid-January, he was finally sacked by the club owner fans unilaterally hate. Last week, Sean Dyche became the 8th Everton manager in as many years, and the new head coach faces a daunting first game in charge with none other than the league leaders Arsenal heading to Goodison Park on Saturday. With the club in disarray and needing a massive turnaround to stay in the league, I spoke to the co-founder of Toffees TV to get the fans' perspective on yet more drama on Merseyside. I'm now joined by Peter McPartland, co-founder of Toffees TV. Peter, thanks for doing this. I want to start last season. Take me back to the match against Crystal Palace, 3-2, incredible match. Once that high wore off of knowing that Everton were going to have another season in the Premier League, what did you think the next step for the club should have been heading into this season?
I think obviously trying to get the right personnel in, trying to get better personnel in to make the squad better, because the Premier League never stands still. We know that. It always keeps going. Everyone wants bigger and better players. And we never ultimately we were given the news that Richarlison would be leaving the club, and obviously he went to Tottenham Hotspur, and yeah, the club once again stood still. We travelled out to America to watch the games over there, and it felt like an inevitability that Everton were going to be in the same position again. It felt like there was a frustration, maybe coming from Frank Lampard at the time, that he couldn't quite get the players in that he wanted to get in. And Everton lost a couple of games, to Arsenal and then to Minnesota, and the Minnesota defeat was embarrassing to say the least. And I think that forced a couple of changes at the club to bring in some better personnel. But there should have really been seismic change, not just small change. There should have been seismic change for a club like Everton to be in a relegation battle and not feel like they have to make huge strides to get away from that area. You'd expect more, and it didn't really come.
Did you believe Frank Lampard was the right man for the job?
No, I'll be honest. Personally, I didn't. I never felt like he was the right man for the job. I think, don't get me wrong, I think he's a really good guy who connected really well with the fan base. But I don't think that's enough to do the job and to do what I've been doing. For this has been my job for the last nearly 9 years. I always feel like there has to be a little bit of a detachment between myself talking every day about people without getting personal, and I never quite connected with them the way other people did. And I think it gave me a perspective that allowed me to see his failings where maybe other people couldn't see it. Listen, we all want our managers and we all want our players to be the best they can and to love the club the way we love them, and that's great. But if they haven't quite got the quality and they can't quite do the job, and I think the big thing for Frank Lampard is he probably had to change the way he wanted to manage and the way he wanted to set teams up. He had to change, the way the team did things, and we became a lot more of a defensive team rather than probably an attacking team. That's probably what Frank Lampard's been set up, not only as a player, but as a coach to do. And I think him almost pretending to be a different kind of coach went against him in the end, because I just don't think he quite had the skills to get through that. And I think that's what's led to obviously appointing Sean Dyche, who is a lot more of a defensive coach.
Yeah, so in comes Sean Dyche. He had his first press conference yesterday. I'm sure you listened to that whole thing. It was interesting what he had to say actually about the supporters. He goes, one thing I know about the Evertonians is that they stand by their club and protect it. I need that as a manager. My staff and players need that full support. We want the fans to give us that and a chance and support us amongst all the noise of what's going on. How do you expect the supporters to take to Dyche?
I think they'll give them 100% backing, absolutely 100%. Listen, you're talking about a fan base that backed Rafa Benitez, because that's what we do. You know, that's what we'll always do. There was some really, really good things said by Sean Dyche yesterday, but there was a couple of little things that jumped out to me that maybe he had been told slight untruths about the fan base. And where we are right now, I think the fan base will 100% get behind this guy. And if he's given 100% and the team are giving 100%, it's always reflected back. I think what's gone on in the last month or so hasn't been reflected, completely truthfully. I think that the fans have got behind Frank Lampard. There wasn't massive calls for him to be sacked, even though the record was really, really poor. And there's been a lot of misdirection about the fan base. And I think just a couple of little things made me feel like he'd been maybe told some, as I said, I don't want to call anyone a liar, just some untruths, I would say. But tomorrow, I think he will understand what the Everton fan base is all about and how it backs its team. And yeah, there's nothing else to say. He will get 100% backing.
Speaking of untruths, Farhad Mushiri, just over a week ago, he sat down with the fan advisory board and he had this to say: "We need a striker. We'll get one. We will strengthen the team, and I have no doubt that the second half of the season will be stronger. That's our objective, and the objective will be achieved." Transfer window shuts, no signings for Everton. Why do you think they were unable to bring anyone in this past window?
Well, when Farhad Moshiri said that, I am pretty sure he felt like Dan Juma was gonna get over the line and was going to sign for Everton. We know he didn't. We know he went to Spurs. The ironic thing about that video was that it was recorded on the Thursday before the West Ham game, when we still had Frank Lampard as our manager, and we were still hoping that Dan Juma would come through the door. It was then released on the Tuesday night, when we knew Dan Juma was not signing for Everton and Frank Lampard had been sacked. So why the club felt they needed to release that video when, 4 days in football is a very long time. 4 days at Everton is a lifetime. It can change everything. So that's that. But I think I think Everton just didn't plan correctly for the window. I think they maybe had certain targets that they wanted and they fell through. And towards the end, they were scrambling about trying to bring anyone in. And I don't know whether it was to fulfill that promise. I'm not sure, but if Everton needed to improve its squad for the upcoming second half of the season, and when you look at the targets and what we missed and where they've gone, I think football people talk and football people look at situations and they see how Everton Football Club is being run and the trajectory of where Everton Football Club looks like it's going. And why would you want to be part of that maybe at this present moment, certainly in January, where everything feels like it's a little bit off the cuff and everything has to be very, very quick? Maybe in the summer you can sit people down and sweet talk them a little bit and let them get an idea of what is actually going on. What are the long-term plans? I think when players come in January, they go straight into it, and maybe players felt like they couldn't make enough of a difference to change what was happening at Everton. And who would want to be part of a relegation fight? You've got to find a player who's got real character. And let's be honest, in January, you're already sort of, I wouldn't say scraping the barrel, but you're looking at players who may have found themselves out of their own teams. And if they're coming in to play for Everton, do they have the quality? So it has been a number of factors that have played into it, but I just don't see Everton as a massive attraction at the moment.
Yeah, and Dyche made a point of saying that at his presser, right? We're not going to bring just anybody in. We got to bring somebody in who's going to impact the club immediately, which that's so difficult to find. You don't really see that, as you mentioned, in January. He also made a point to say that he truly believes that the players in the squad at the moment are very, very good and good enough. Clearly, I'm kind of reading in between the lines, but good enough to keep them in the Premier League. Do you share that same feeling?
He's got to say that. He's got to have confidence in his players. He's got to, make them feel like when it comes to 12:30 in the UK Saturday, that they're going to come out and give Arsenal a great game, because obviously it's going to be a tough side. It's going to be a tough game against a good side. I think the problem with Everton this season is goals, because you can have good sides and you can have bad sides,
Yeah.
If they put the ball in the back of the net, then they'll win games of football. And winning games of football gives you time to maybe transition from being in a bad side to a good side. Everton just don't have goals. Last season we had Richarlison, who was nicking the goals in those big games that were getting us the 3 points. We just don't have any goals in our side, and that is the problem. Anthony Gordon's gone out the door, and that isn't fans aren't sitting here crying about that. It seems like a really, really good deal for a guy that didn't seem quite like he had his head in the right place of where we are. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin can find some form, if a change of formation suddenly makes us nick games because we're scoring a couple more goals, if we can start scoring off set pieces, which are huge, then that will be a huge factor. I think he'll get us defensively better, and I think we'll get a lot closer in games. And it's just about those little moments. You know, we were beaten by Wolves and we were beaten by Southampton at Goodison Park very recently. We went 1-0 up in those games. If we could have found the second goal in those games, we would have won those games. And if we were 6 points better off right now, the world would look a completely different place. So it's just about finding that little bit extra. And that might come down to a bit of bravery, by the way, as well. Being 1-0 up and saying, go on, we're going to go and get a second goal here. And that might be just a change that Sean Dyche can give his team. Be braver, go out there and go get that second goal and maybe put this game to bed and then get your 3 points and everything will be okay.
Yeah, just 15 goals scored by Everton this season, which is the worst in the league. And obviously that's going to keep you near the bottom of the table. If you look at, the goal scorers on this team, Demarai Gray, five goals, Anthony Gordon, 3 goals. But obviously Dominic Calvert-Lewin is being talked about a lot, who can work really well potentially in Dyche's formation, his starting 11, only has 1 goal this season, obviously plagued by injuries. But to me, if Everton are going to score more goals and have a serious chance of staying in the Premier League, you got to set up defensively. But I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin has to be the guy to score the goals, Peter.
100%. And listen, Dom's been a victim of a stop-start career for the last 18 months. He's picked up various injuries where it's strange because as a fan base, you talk about communication, and we're being told he's going to be out for this period of time, and then that period of time becomes longer, and it becomes longer, and a frustration then grows within the fan base of, does this guy really care, or is he really up for the fight? And I find that unfair because no player wants to be injured. This is a guy who Everton brought in for just over £1 million from Sheffield United, who's worked so hard to change his game, to bulk up, to become a Premier League, star athlete. And if he could just get a run of games and you could find that sharpness, his body seems to be letting him down a little bit. And maybe, again, who knows, maybe if he goes and sees, a different doctor, or he goes and sees a different specialist in whatever problems he's having, maybe that he'll get some kind of success that will allow him to change his look, essentially get 15 games under his belt. I think that would make a massive difference to Everton. This is a guy who's been stop-start, and he scored, I think it was in the Crystal Palace game that led us on to winning 3-0, our best performance of the season, and then he gets injured just before the World Cup. And I think when they actually did the diagnosis of him, they actually found that he had 3 different injuries, and they weren't even sure which one was worse. And I don't know whether it's bad luck. I don't know whether he's bulked up too quickly. I don't know whether it's his jumping style, because he is so good in the air. There's something not right, and maybe if they can get to the bottom of that, we will have the player we had under Carlo Ancelotti, the guy who can get those tap-ins, get those headers. Don't forget, you talked about the Crystal Palace game. He's the guy who won us the game. He's the guy who found the winning goal with 5 minutes to go that kept Everton in the Premier League. He has these big moments in him. It's just about unlocking them, and hopefully with a little bit of luck, the luck that Sean Dyche will be dreaming of, he could be the catalyst to keep Everton in the Premier League.
Arsenal up next. Is it crazy to say that this is the perfect game for Sean Dyche to go into in his first match as a boss of Everton?
Not at all. It's not crazy to suggest that. We've beaten Arsenal the last 2 seasons under similar circumstances, certainly last season. I would rather be playing a game like Arsenal than someone like like a Villa or a Leeds, where there's a lot of expectation that you have to win, get those 3 points. I don't think there's any anything on this game in terms of this expectation. No one is looking at Everton thinking they're beating Arsenal. This is a huge game for Sean Dyche. He must win this. Mikel Arteta's got to win this game. Arsenal have got to win this game. They've got Manchester City breathing down their neck. We've got this game, and then we've got the Merseyside derby next week. I look at those two games, and I am not worried about either of those games. I'm looking at those as the preparation, the starting point. Everton have to come out the traps against Arsenal. The players have to be ready. We want to see some commitment. We want to see a new shape to the team. We want to see us making chances, and we want to just have that little bit of belief back that there's something there. There's something that to believe in. I think that's been missing over the last few weeks, and has led to a lot of frustration in the fan base. So I've got no worries about this game at all. It'll take care of itself. It will, these big games, sometimes you can look at them and go, oh my God, we've got Arsenal. But we've played Liverpool at home this season, got a 0-0 draw. Chelsea was a very close game. The Manchester United game was a very, very close game. So I've got no worries about this one at all.
Yeah, if there was ever to set your marker and get the fan base to believe in something that can happen, it's back-to-back results in these next two matches for Everton. 17 matches remaining. Arsenal and Liverpool up next, like you mentioned. Using your head, Peter, not your heart, how do you think this season ends for Everton?
If I'm using my head, then Everton would be relegated because they just don't have the goals. But that is using, old logic, I'm going to call it, because we have not seen Sean Dyche's team yet. We don't know what the shape's going to be, the formation's going to be, who's going to be the important players in it. So, like you just said, these two games are going to shape that, and certainly Saturday's going to really inform that knowledge. So, my heart right now says Everton get relegated, because what I've seen so far this season is they are one of the poorest teams in the Premier League, and there's no hiding from that. There's no, magical player coming to save us this season. There's no one coming back from injury that is going to propel this team up the Premier League. But there is Sean Dyche. There is maybe a new way of doing things, a new way of thinking. There's maybe more in the tank of some of these players, and hopefully that is what gets us over the line in the end.
Yeah, listen, I don't know if this means anything to you, but I totally believe Sean Dyche can turn this thing around. I think there's some good players there, and he's a fantastic manager. Pete, thanks so much for doing this, guys. Make sure you head over to Toffee's TV on YouTube. These guys do fantastic work. Peter and his partner, Barry Cass. I've been following you guys since last season. Incredible. I mean, from being in Canada, to be able to feel what Evertonians were going through and are going through during this time. It's amazing, and the way you guys put it together is fantastic. So thank you so much for doing this, and keep up the good work.
Thanks very much for having us.